One last thing that people wanted us to comment on. Paddy the Baddy, friend of the show. We had him before he got famous. An amazing speech he gave after his fight about a friend of his who'd committed suicide. And it was like, I think it was the best post-fight speech in terms of most powerful in UFC history.
For sure, yeah.
This is the maddest thing is like, people compare Paddy to Conor McGregor because he's like the fastest rising star since McGregor. He's the first fighter I have seen where he wasn't the main eventer, but he was the main event.
Yeah.
Since McGregor. And this isn't a slight on McGregor, or, well, I mean, maybe it is in a way in terms of how he's misused his fame, but what Paddy did on that night surpassed anything Conor McGregor's ever done in his career, ever. Like, that is so powerful what he did there. It connected with so many people. It went like viral on viral on viral. Like, it was. So people wanted us to talk about how he said, I'd rather have my friend crying on my shoulder than going to his funeral. And I think that it connected. It struck up with a lot of people. It was so from the heart in the heat of the moment. It was not planned. It was not. And to have someone who is a cage fighter, who's tough as nails, saying that and speaking so vulnerably, tears in his eyes, and then afterwards him sobbing on the cage floor as "You'll Never Walk Alone" plays. It was like, even now just talking about it, goosebumps, you know what I mean? It was like, we had this guy in the studio before this whole thing before he was even signed with the UFC, and him sort of saying, "I'm going to take over." And there was no lie, there was a hint of me that I thought, yeah, I mean, you've got a lot of the talents and people are going to connect with you, but like, to imagine that he would take over to this level and become this size of a star in this short spell of time is blowing my fucking mind.
And in many ways he was primed. Like, he had a whole city behind him, he had the perfect background, he's got a good style for that as well, so he's got the perfect kind of...
I mean, he's very unique looking, he's very, you'll know that guy, the Paddy wigs and all of that.
The wigs are
But it's the skill set. Like, I mean, he's an elite level fighter, but like, how good he is sort of yet to be seen, but he's very good.
And what I love is he's capitalizing now. So it's not about it's not just about him being a great fighter. It's actually just about him connecting with people and having a relationship.
That's the difference, yeah. And I think that's what Conor kind of did in terms of Ireland, that was for you and that sort of thing. But Paddy is built different to him. He's a real people person.
Yeah,
like he's all about his community and giving back to his friends and his family and all of that. And I'm not saying that there's none of that, and I don't want to talk about Conor too much, because
I'm sure Conor's given plenty back, is what
I'm sure he has, but Conor's alienated his whole fan base by acting like a big weirdo. And now me included, like, I don't root for him in a fight. I don't give a shit if he wins or loses.
Is he putting together McGregor Mayweather too?
No, that's not happening.
No?
Dana's cancelled that. He said that's not happening. But he's making a comeback. I think it's a pointless exercise because the guy's basically been on holiday for the best part of 6 years.
You saw him stamp on that guy's hat the other day, of course. That was a big...
Because the guy throws a hat at Conor on his birthday bash in Ibiza, and Conor's like, oh, and he throws it on the floor and he's like... Stamps on it in such an aggressive way, and I'm like, bro, like, you're an absolute clown.
Because at one point I think
who are you, man?
Like,
you've got a fucking Lamborghini yacht, for fuck's sake. What do you care about a hat being thrown at you?
Yeah.
And it was thrown softly as well. It wasn't even like...
It was a hat.
It was just like, you know what I mean? It wasn't... And he's getting like all... And I'm like, what are you on? What are you doing? You're supposed to be a world-class fighter, and you're stamping on someone's hat as if like... Ooh, like,
isn't that kind of a mental health problem in itself, though?
Mate, he's got problems, but
but in a different way.
I would just urge Paddy to just stick with where you're going.
He's lucky he's got Molly and people like that around him. I mean, he seems quite grounded. There's a lot of grounded elements.
Molly's the realest one.
Yeah, and I know there's always those people who always go, like, oh, Paddy had some tweets back in the day or whatever. Like, this is, people want to try and get him down or whatever. What he is saying and doing now, I fully think I stand behind. I think what he's saying and being as a figure, like a role model, I think is fantastic.
I feel like so many men immediately would have went, yeah.
You'd almost have, you could feel people reaching for their phone and going, who am I going to text?
Yeah, it's very rare I see something happen and I'm like, oh fucking hell, you've spoken and the world is listening here.
Right.
And that's so rare, because of all of the stars in boxing and fighting, very rarely does that ever happen. Like, I can't think of many times where a fighter has had the world in the palm of his hand. McGregor obviously being one of them, and Paddy, off of 3 fights, having that level of attention. And part of this is off the back of Conor, because he's propelled the UFC into a way he has.
Similar backgrounds in that sense too.
Well, working class kids. But the point is the UFC is so much bigger now because of Conor and other stars, that when Paddy spoke, it went further after a shorter amount of time of him being in the UFC. But it's the content.
Yeah.
It's what he said. I just feel like, I hope he follows that road. It doesn't get sidetracked by the boozing and the partying and the bullshit and the, I know he's got a settled life with his woman and all of that. And it's just like, don't lose yourself now, kid. Like, you've got everything where it needs to be. Just focus on the arts.
Well,
you know what I mean?
McGregor was also built up to a point where, like, it was unattainable that any human being could be almost Conor McGregor. So the standards for Conor were so high, right? Paddy has come out the gate quite fallible, and he was clearly a bit rough around the edges in a different way to the way that McGregor was. He's got a bit more of a kind of shaggy look to him, where it's maybe a bit more relatable.
I think Paddy rates himself, but he doesn't love himself the way Conor did.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, there was a razzmatazz and a showmanship that is it was so fucking entertaining. Yeah. I can't take that away from the guy, even though I dislike him now. There's a likability there that is different.
There's a groundedness.
And I just hope he keeps a hold of that no matter what. And I think in Liverpool it's going to happen.
Yeah, weirdly. I feel like there's a lot, I don't know, Liverpool does have a bit of a knack for kind of making people who can stay quite grounded, like
Steven Gerrard.
Yeah. Although, obviously Gerrard had his own thing where he slapped a DJ or something, but apart from that, like,
but people like Robbie Fowler and that, like
Fowler was. I've interviewed Robbie Fowler not long ago, and he was so aware of being Liverpudlian. Like, there's just something about, if you're aware of where you come from and who you represent and who you are, there's almost a bit of a weight on you to be that. And there were times where I think Conor maybe forgot a little bit about that, or felt like, well, I've risen above that.
Oh, he 100% has acted like he's left that now, and he's above it, and in my opinion. And I think that's why if you mention McGregor to an Irish person, they sort of they're like, oh, not that guy,
right?
Like,
and that wasn't the case before.
He's lost the people 1,000,000% because of the umpteen dumb shit things he's done, and how in love with himself he became. Hence the stamping on the hat as if it's a fucking person.
Do you know, another thing I think has actually taken a back seat is I've not actually heard that much about men's, or just in people's in general, but specifically men's mental health recently. Like, it was really of the moment at one point. Everyone was talking about the mental health. Everyone was talking and sharing those kind of things. And part of it has almost been...
It became a tool for, oh yeah, I've had mental health problems too. And it's like, no, but you're feeling down every now and then. That's different to what people are actually... Like,
but do you
know what I mean?
Yeah, but the thing that I think really stamped it out was COVID.
Yeah.
Because what couldn't be acknowledged by a lot of governments, and I'm not saying this from a conspiracy angle.
No, it's a reality angle.
What couldn't be acknowledged by a lot of governments was the mental impact that all of these different things were going to have. The worry about a pandemic, you worry about your family, your dad, your mum, your wife.
I don't think the world has ever been more mentally stressed out.
Right.
In my existence than that moment.
And I don't really feel like a government at any point has kind of addressed, hey, we're in this together, in a sense. Like,
ironic.
Yeah, I get that. And that's what I'm saying, like, because we're not. And to add to that, they've almost like pushed it down. So it's like, hey, should we look at men's mental health? No, we'll push that one in a couple of years' time when the suicides rate has gone down, or when this is
1,000,000%. There's no doubt in my mind the suicide rate's gone through the roof because of what went on, because people were communicating. The amount of like physical interaction that people lost out on, that changes how you feel.
Yeah, and also just being alone, being with possibly an abusive partner, being with someone who you don't want to be with in a relationship. All these different kind of things that stopped people's lives. Paddy... I think really spoke to those people.
He reawoke in that
situation. Yeah. And then afterwards, did fuck the Tories. Like, it sort of works. But like, those two things go hand in hand. And no one's saying fuck conservatism, although some people are. What they're saying is fuck these people who clearly don't care about us, or clearly
have a party when we're in the
absolutely.
Misery. Yeah.
To add to that, we've had so many times where there have been government people who have had a moment. They've been given a microphone that's been put in front of them, not after fighting in a cage, by the way, after having a private car to a studio, and they've gone, say something to the people, and they've just gone, well, I think the important thing we've got to remember here is the economy's got to recover. Paddy spoke to more people in that short speech after being punched in the face and being like, you know, all these different things that you
in
get.
a scrap.
Yeah, in a proper scrap with a guy who, by the way, is probably the best fighter he's faced so far, of those guys he's faced in the UFC. And then he said that. More people listened to that than anything Boris Johnson has said in a very long time.
He found out about his friend dying the day before the fight.
Absolutely.
And he had to keep it together, and he had a job to do. And that's what being a man is about in many respects, is
maturity.
You have to take on board all this bullshit that you're going through in life sometimes. That's what builds strength in people. If there's one thing that I feel bulletproof from in my life right now, it's knowing what I've overcome. So for him to do that in his life and to be able to handle that moment and then break down in front of the world, it was probably the most powerful thing I've seen in MMA and you know, in boxing, MMA, all of it. It doesn't. Maybe people might think I'm going overboard there, but like, no, this is real. And I think some people in the fight game, they use mental health as a way of, you know,
good marketing.
It is, and I think that there's a lot of people in influencers and all of that. Mental health. It's like you can just sort of feel the reality from the bullshitters, and that was the realest shit ever that Paddy said that moment, and that's why it connected so well.
It was also partly because it wasn't about him really.
Oh, not
it
at
was
all.
Actually about someone else, and very often I think, you know, most people they don't want to co-opt someone else's mental health, but he was speaking about something that impacted him, and there were so many people that could relate to that. You know, it's quite impersonal to hear someone go, "My mental health's not been good recently," because people sort of go, "Yeah, everyone's mental health is good right now."
I genuinely think he saved lives. And I know that's such a that would have saved lives. There's just not a doubt in my mind. It
Absolutely.
Couldn't have not. It's
but
like,
it could be one life, and it could be 100. But there's a real issue right now, I think, in Britain where people don't feel particularly hopeful. And I'd imagine that goes on outside
especially
Britain.
young men. And that's kind of what, I mean, we mentioned Jordan Peterson earlier in the podcast when he talks about young men and how disillusioned they feel. And that's one of the things I do think he gets right occasionally is like, I think men aren't getting a great rub of it in society at the moment. And that's not to say women are. I just feel like men feel a bit forgotten and like, it's I have a lot of them reaching out to me, you know, and just hopeless. So that's the feeling, and the mood is so like we can't change our lives anymore. Like the ladder to grow from being a middle class kid to an upper class kid or a working class kid to get up in life and to make something of yourself. It feels like the ladder has been pulled up for these kids, and and Paddy is a one off. He's an exception. I am a one off. You know, I'm the lucky one but there's not. It doesn't happen. Do you know what I mean? They feel like, oh, fuck me, I've got a life of this shit.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
and then you're told there's an impending recession or what they call like a financial crisis or any of these kind of things. It doesn't leave you feeling particularly hopeful, should we say? Well, and I get it, like people go, you've got to deal with the reality of this.
Yeah. Most
Not
people
really.
doing well in the upper echelons, it's daddy's money situations. They've been born into it. Sure. You know what I mean? And in the 60s and 70s and 80s, there was so much more room to grow from being lower class, middle class, to get up in there. If you had that motivation, that drive, and that intelligence, you could make a million out of yourself. You know, you do whatever you want.
You could feel that way, yeah.
The doors are just shutting now, and I think that's part of it as well. So there was a little study about antidepressants that I did want to also touch on, saying that, you know, there's a debate there of whether serotonin levels are actually linked with depression and stuff like that. And I just thought, a study has found this. It doesn't necessarily mean the study is bang on. You know what I mean? Things can be because. And I'm not saying that it is wrong or right or whatever, but all I can say is, and people ask me this every now and then, so I might as well talk about it. My medication has changed my life. Like, I'm on sertraline, which is a common antidepressant. And I think even you can tell, like, in the year that I've been on it, around about a year, my depression and my self-control and all of that and like my outbursts and things that I used to struggle with, it's calmed right down. Everything, and it hasn't turned me into someone I wasn't, or it's just sorted out those nosedives of feeling like you want to kill yourself or impending doom or anxiety. Don't get me wrong, it doesn't make life perfect, and I'm not on a high dose particularly, but I feel like it just enabled me to manage life in a way that isn't as kamikaze as what it used to feel.
Right.
And,
as knee-jerk.
Yeah, and post-traumatic stress disorder, which I've had enough of in my life, it's really helped me cope with that. So I seen that and I thought, you know what, I've got a platform. I want to tell my side of what I feel about antidepressants, and I genuinely feel like they've potentially saved my life, really, because I was spiraling, going down the wrong road.
How did you feel about them before you started taking them?
Terrified.
Right. That's what I was wondering.
Yeah, I was worried because obviously when you live in your own head and you're a thinker and you're an overthinker, you worry that they're going to turn you into some sort of like zombie or robot.
Makes you feel like it's some sort of like mental vasectomy or something like that in a way.
Oh yeah, I was worried that things like my creativity would be affected, that I would be affected in my decision making, and I would change who it really hasn't. All it's done is stop the catastrophe feeling, like that kamikaze feeling of, right, everything's shit, I should just kill myself, all those sort of, and don't get me wrong, every now and then something creeps in, but it is so much more manageable, and it just feels like this is what I should have been like.
Right.
This is normal.
So it allows you to correct.
Yeah. Before I was thinking about suicide on a very regular basis. Now I don't. That's normal.
Yeah.
This is a good thing. And some people need antidepressants. I'm one of them.
What's your, you don't have to have a roadmap, like a ready-made answer, but like, what is your roadmap with that? Is that something you now feel you've just accepted it and you feel very comfortable with antidepressants? Like,
yeah, I'd personally be comfortable taking them for the rest of my life. Same dose that I'm on right now. I feel like it gives me a really leveled out feeling of life, and that when bad things happen, I feel bad. When good things happen, I feel good. It's like before, when bad things would happen, I'd just think, what's the fucking point?
Right, you fall off the deep end.
Yeah, and combined with like a rough life at times, like definitely there was reasons for me feeling exhausted. But yeah, it's been amazing for me.
It's also interesting because obviously antidepressants don't stop bad things from happening. It helps you to deal with the bad things.
That's all I'm saying.
And that's kind of the point. Is it's not something that goes, no, everything's fine now.
Yeah.
It's kind of it gives you the space to make the tools to make everything.
But some people just don't realize that, like, when you go through shit, your brain is no different to your leg. Like, in that, if you have multiple injuries to your leg, it ain't going to be as good as it was before. And this is the way I feel about it. I'm not backing this up with any science, I could be wrong, but it was the way it was explained to me by a doctor who said, you've been through a lot of trauma, your serotonin levels may be, out of whack because of what you've been through. And I'm not even joking. Within 3 days of taking the first tablet, I was like, fuck me, I feel different.
No, I remember you saying that.
Like, yeah. And the doctor was like, oh, it'll take a month. And I was like, I'm telling you now, when you're as low as I've been, you feel a difference immediately. And I'm feeling a difference. And then I had to boost the amount up a little bit. If anything, now I'd be worried about coming off them because I feel so stable and just good. I don't feel, I'm not walking around all airy-fairy. You know what I mean? You don't like.
That's the worry, isn't it? For a lot of people, I think. Like they sort of just like. Maybe, you know what? Maybe some people will have that reaction to certain medication, and that's why different medications are made for different people's cases, right?
I mean, I've heard people have adverse reactions to antidepressants sometimes, and I think that everyone needs to treat everything individually. Not everyone will get the same impact as I got.
You were lucky to hit first time, essentially, and sort of go, oh, right, this is good for me.
Yeah, thank God. And but this is the thing, is people take all sorts for all sorts, and then they worry about something for their mind. But then there's a lot of people who, and I also agree with this, I scientifically, like chemically, I really feel like I needed them. Not just because I had a bad breakup or something, and I think some people go on antidepressants unnecessarily so. And that's where you really need to define, is this a bad week, bad month, rough year, or is this a chemical issue? Like, I think for me, it was a last resort. It was, if I don't fucking get something, I'm going to fucking kill myself here.
Right.
And I really meant it, and I really felt it in my head. And I was desperate, and I just rang the doctor, and I was like, I'm telling you, I've been through a lot. This is needed here. So I think that's why you take them. It shouldn't, I'm not saying a complete last resort. I don't think I should have left it as long as I did. And maybe therapy and other things are a go-to beforehand, before you just say gives the drugs. But like I'm saying, there are too many people also on the other side. I left it too long, and there's too many people jumping the gun.
Yeah, and there's got to be a middle ground.
Yeah.
And essentially, like, it isn't an exact science. You can't really...
No, it's trial and error.
Yeah, because a lot of weirdly, like, if you see someone limping down the street and their legs snapped in half, you should go to a hospital. But when someone's walking down the street depressed, you're like, they might be hungover, they might be whatever, and maybe you might see certain things in certain friends, but these things also happen slowly. Like, something terrible might happen and you don't see the impact on someone mentally immediately. Or they'll go, well, I'm just having a hard time or whatever. So I guess that's where the talking thing that Paddy said sort of helps.
You figure that out. Yeah, because
that's the point.
Because if your life is actually pretty decent and you're feeling suicidal, then there's a problem. And that's where I was sort of realizing, like, my life's better than a lot of people's lives. Why do I feel like this? People like me, and I've got this YouTube thing.
Well, don't go overboard.
People watch me.
People watch. That's the point.
That's the main thing, bitches. Yeah. Keep the money coming.
Even the doctor was going delusional. Yeah, people like me, doc. Sure, they do.
Yeah, I've read the comments.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Listen, I'm in the Twitch comments. Yeah.
Absolutely. So yeah, I just wanted to have a little bit on that after the Paddy thing, because people are talking about it again, and thank God. So well done, Paddy. Shout out to the big lad, and hopefully we'll get him back on the pod to discuss his journey to superstardom.
Without a fee. It's going to be a sticking point, Brian.
We actually paid for him last time.
Yeah.
And I don't think he needs the money anymore.
Not huge.
Do you know what it's funny, because next time I connect, I'll be like, suppose the prices have gone up now, have they?
I've still got his phone number. Do you think I'd text him and see if he's still got the same number?
I don't know, but I do.
Remember, he was quite humble. He was sort of like, oh, if you don't mind, I'll get the train and I'll go here and do this. And
do you know what it is?
Thanks a lot,
this
mate.
is the funny thing is, and I remember him bringing his girlfriend down to London, being like, take her out for the weekend, and ironically had a pizza afterwards, because he fucking loves a pizza.
Yeah.
And I remember the littlest of things, but like, it's just so great to see how in such a short space of time he's took off like a fucking rocket.
Yeah.